So part of the beginning of our church involves evangelism. And it really is our desire that our church would grow primarily from evangelism. That really is only the true way a church grows. Hello, and welcome back to my vlog. And today I want to share with you two things. One, sharing about what do we do for evangelism with our church plant, and also another tip for pastors and church planters in regards to income, ways of having income. Because sometimes as pastors, sometimes churches don't pay us well enough to supply all our needs. And church planters too, and depending on how you're doing church planting too. Some church planters have support through other churches. Sometimes you don't because you're not part of a denomination. That's actually our case with New Life Christian Community. We're not actually a part of a denomination or an affiliation of any kind. And so we have to raise funds on our own. And part of that is having me to find other work on the side. In this climate today, we're kind of in that transition from COVID to post-COVID. And with all this transition too, there has been a lot of job loss, which has made it harder for pastors who need part-time work to find work. And oftentimes, when I've talked with other pastors too, some who are trying to find other work or leaving ministry and finding other work, a lot of them are finding a hard time finding work because for some reason, a lot of businesses don't want to hire a pastor. Can't figure out why. But anyway, I'm going to talk about some tips for possibility of jobs and other ways of finding alternative income, sometimes in the non-traditional way of finding income. Still legal, but in a non-traditional way of finding income. So we're going to look at those two things today. Let's get back at it. All right, so now we're going to look at some of the websites. I'll actually show the front pages of some of these websites and to share with you a little bit of some possibility of gaining income as a pastor or church planter. And as I said moments ago, that sometimes in ministry, sometimes the church can't pay enough for a pastor. And so sometimes we have to do what we call bivocational, meaning that some of our income comes from the church and some of it comes from other sources, doing some kind of other work on the side. And there's more and more of a trend of that happening in the church, where a lot of pastors are becoming what we call free agents in a way, in that they pastor a church, but they have a second means of income in order to support themselves and their family, and so that the church can focus on being the church as well. Now, it is preferable for the church to take care of the pastor's salary. So if a church can absolutely afford to, that's a bad way of putting it, isn't it, to afford. But if the money isn't there for a church to have a pastor full-time, then the church needs to do a part-time pastor. And the church needs to be very, very clear about that. I have been in a church where I was actually starved out as a pastor. And that was not a good situation. The church decided that, oh, we can't afford you, when there was plenty of money in the account still. And so I had done that church. And with this church plant, nothing against our church plant. We have some wonderful people who are part of our church and are doing all that they can to give in order to support my family and I, and the work that God's called us to do together. But our church isn't at the point where they can support us financially fully yet. And so there's something to be said, though, for a pastor having a side ministry to be able to do as well too. It kind of, I think in some ways it helps us pastors and church planters to get beyond our church. And remember that this is about God's kingdom, not just about one local church. So yes, we are focused on a local church, but God's kingdom is far greater than just one local body. I was talking with someone just today, actually, about that very thing, that sometimes we have this mentality of it's about building up our own kingdom instead of God's kingdom. So it's really got to be about building God's kingdom, just not our local church. Our local church are part of the kingdom, and we want to see our local church grow in spiritual depth, grow in relationship, grow in love for God, and grow in reaching the lost for Christ. So when it comes down to this, though, what kind of jobs are there that pastors can do? Since COVID hit, that caused a crimp somewhat in being able to find jobs. And even in today's market, it is still difficult to find full-time and part-time jobs as a pastor. I don't know what it is. I've talked to other pastors too, that some who have looked for other work that find it really difficult. And I don't know what that is for sure. Is it just that people see the pastor on the resume and they think, well, we don't want a pastor on staff. We don't want them getting all preachy on us. But there could be other reasons why. There are some jobs out there that pastors, when they're out of ministry, would fit really well in. Some of it is like management. Some of it can be human relations, things like that. One means is actually to be a chaplain. A friend of mine, a church planter out in BC, is a chaplain. Actually, oversees several chaplains actually while he's working on doing a church plant, and so that is one possibility, being a chaplain as well. So there's different places you can find for that. There's being a chaplain in a prison system, for the Army, hospital systems too. I don't know with hospital systems though whether they have paid clergy or not to be chaplains, but some hospitals do have chaplaincies. I know of the hospital in Barrhead, which is north of us. There's a pastor who is just south of Barrhead that often goes in to be chaplain in the hospital. And again, I don't know if he volunteers or is paid for that or not. I don't know. I know the ministerial up in Barrhead is involved in that as well. So chaplaincy, though, is one way to maybe garner income as a pastor on the side. So that's one option. Another option for doing work is going into work for yourself, being self-employed. I've tried a few different ventures with that. None of them worked out for whatever reason. I actually did an LED sign business shortly after we're done in our last church. And but the economy was on such a downhill spiral at the time that no one wants to buy knick-knacky gifts or things that are of high dollar value. And these LEDs were that. They were more of a higher dollar value. I think they were nice, but and I got lots of compliments about them. But because of the downturn of the economy, people didn't have extra money to spend on frivolous things like LED signs. And so that business failed. And I should give this point along the way too, though, pastors or church planters, that if you are one who does a side business to garner some income and it fails, that's okay. Entrepreneurs often try several businesses until something works and sticks. So like even think of Donald Trump. I hate to use him as an example in some ways, but in the business world, he is known for making smart choices in building businesses. But thing is, he had a lot of failures along the way for building businesses. And so like any business owner, sometimes it takes a few times before you find something that works and kind of hits and gets up and running. So if you're one who has different skills to do some other kind of side business, don't be afraid to try and do it. It may be a way that you can garner income while you are waiting for your church to go to the point to be able to support you financially. Or maybe that's what God wants to be. Maybe God wants you to be bivocational in the church part-time and working on the side too. I know of other pastors that are doing that intentionally because it gets them out to the community more. And so those are a couple options with that as well. Another way is, which is more of a non-traditional way of garnering income, is to do some kind of business online, some side stuff. And some of this side stuff can involve your own skills. So I'm going to pop this up on the screen here right now. On my screen here, you'll see here is Fiverr. And this is not a cloud source, but it's one of those gig type of jobs that you can put yourself up on there, put up what kind of projects you're willing to do, service you're willing to provide. And is a whole list of different kind of things here. I'll actually just go to the main page here a second. It's not going there for some reason. But on Fiverr, if I wasn't signed in, you'd be able to see this on the front page. But they have a list of a lot of different kind of jobs in there that are available, of people who you can hire them to do different jobs. There's stuff like logos. I will actually bring up my dashboard here again, because I can show you at least mine here. Gigs, there we go. So on my gigs page, I have a few different ones here. I have 4 active ones. I have one where I can design a simple and clean brochure. I actually have a little bit of background. I worked for a print shop in Edmonton, and so I learned some skills, being able to make brochures, doing posters, business cards. And so I thought, well, I have some skills with that. I could do that. And so I actually went on Fiverr some time ago, wasn't getting business, shut it down because I was trying to do some other side ministry. Again, because of COVID, shut that down because churches were shut down for a lot of it. So anyway, as you see on the screen here, I was able to do some brochures, flyers, posters, business cards. I'm working on 2 as well that aren't up and running yet, but one for doing logos. If you have seen my logo for Kevin Henry Ministries, that's a logo I designed myself. So if you have some abilities in graphic arts, you can go onto Fiverr and sell your services that way. Also doing voiceover for podcast drops or advertisements. Here's a way for us as pastors. We are vocal people as it is pastors, and so we could use our skills in oration to be able to garner other income. So you can go into Fiverr and say, I'm willing to do voiceovers for your podcast. All I want from you then is your script of what you want me to say, and then you can record it. And software is simple for this. All you need is a mic to plug in. I actually have a mic right here that I use for when I'm going to do recordings. I used to use it for my podcasts. So I use that, and you can use a simple program called Audacity to record your voice. And so for pastors, this is a simple, easy one to do. And especially if you've got compliments about, oh man, I love listening to your voice. This may be an avenue of income for you. There's a lot of other ways to make money off of YouTube, or not YouTube, off of Fiverr. You could also, if you have editing skills for videos, you can do editing there. Also editing for written word, for blog posts, for articles. People can hire out for having someone edit their written material. So there, you go to Fiverr. I'll put a link in the description for this and all the other sites that I'll be showing you today. So there's many other skills on there that people will hire people out for doing. They call it gigging. So that is one option as well. Another one here is called Checkout 51. And I'm actually just going to log out here a second so you can see the front page. Here is the home page for Checkout 51. Now, this really isn't a way of garnering income. This is actually a way to save money on your groceries and other purchases you make. So it's an app, you sign up, and when you go shopping, you can do your pre-list of what you want to buy and or add it later. So once you bought your products, you come home, scan your receipt, upload it to the site, whether it be through your app on your phone or your laptop. And then they take some time to verify the purchase, and then you get a discount back to you. We went shopping just yesterday, my wife and I, for some groceries, and there's one item that we had purchased that was on the list for what they had on the list for the time for money back. And so we got $1.50 back from that purchase. And so it can save you money in the end buying groceries by using Checkout 51. And also they have stores like Costco, Walmart, Canadian Tire, Superstore, Great Canadian Wholesalers, some other companies as well on there that it's a way for you to save money for your groceries. So it's not that you're making money from it, although they do have a survey section where you can earn money for doing surveys too. But the payout seems to be pretty small. So you have to kind of be careful what kind of surveys there are, because if you spend too much time on surveys that don't have much payback, it may not be worth your time to do so. That's another one actually, is filling out surveys online. And so there are some sites you can go to. You have to check to make sure they're readable though. With all these sites, you have to make sure that they're reputable, because you can do further searches on these things and find other sites that are helpful too. But you still have to be cautious, because there are scam websites out there that are trying to scam your time and even maybe your money too. So be cautious about that. So that's check out 51. Did you know that you could be paid to test people's websites? That is possible from this site, User Testing. I'm just starting to get on this myself to check it out. So I don't know what the payout is like for it, but there are some sites that will pay you for your time to check their websites, to test it out for them, to see where they need to improve on their websites. So usertesting.com is one of those websites. Here's another idea. Do you like music or movies or other kind of social media? Here's a one called Slice the Pie. And it's a site where people put up their music to get feedback. What is your impressions about it? What do you think? What do you like about it? What you don't like about it? And they get paid for that. I've only done one survey right now so far from this one. This is, again, one of those ones. I want to do a couple more to find out for sure if this is worthwhile the time, because the one I did, I spent about 10 minutes on it and got paid 1 cent. So this may not be worth time, but I think worth checking out at least anyway. Maybe it's something you want to do in your spare time, where you want to check out what kind of new music is coming out possibly. Then you can give your feedback and, yeah, sure, get paid for it. But if you want to make a lot of money on it, you probably won't do that. Again, on most of these sites, it's not going to be enough to pay you full time. It's supplemental for income, but it could be helpful still. Here's another, perfection.com. This is another site for testing. You'll just have to check the site out. It's testing products. So you'll have to check into that on your own. I don't know much about it yet. I'm just looking into it myself as well. Here is another website testing site called trymyui.com. And another site I'm just getting into to checking out. So I don't know what the payout is. Maybe I'll put something in the description later as to these sites, how worthwhile are they. But here's another website testing place. Another one, utest.com. Another website testing place. You can check that out as well. Like giving your opinion, here's another site, resolutionresearch.com. They will pay you as well for your opinions on things. Again, another site I'm just getting into, so I'm not sure what the payout is like yet. But again, these are all things that are possibilities that are just side hustles in a way, side incomes that can be helpful. If you and your spouse or even your children are involved in some of these sites, it could be maybe of benefit financially for your family. Side hustle. I just bring this up here to decide as a reminder for myself. Actually, I mentioned this when I talked about Fiverr about doing voiceovers. You could do also being a voice actor, selling your voice for doing different kind of voices. Are you a kind of person who does well at doing impersonating voices or making different sounds with your voice? Then you might be a person who would suit well for doing something like this. Here's one other way that one can make money. This is a passive way of making income. You may have heard the term passive income. There's all sorts of ways of doing passive income. And this is one I did when I used to have a blog. My blog was pretty small, so I didn't get much out of it. But if you have a blog and you have a pretty good following on your blog already, or even if you're doing a YouTube channel, which we'll get to in a moment, if you're doing a YouTube channel and you have a good following, maybe you have making money off your YouTube channel. Here's another way to make money too, by doing advertisements through affiliate marketing. So christianbooks.com has that. Also, Amazon has that as well too, called Amazon Associates. This is a way that you can advertise for these companies, and you'll make money off of them because the advertisements they put on your blog or your video as well. Amazon is actually another great way to make side income as well. I'm looking into this somewhat more myself too. One of them here is actually, if you like to design t-shirts, you can make money. You make the design and Amazon will sell it for you. So they take a percentage of what you sell your shirts for, but it is an easy way to manage selling t-shirts if you design it. I designed one while I was running Step Out Ministries. I had a crown of thorns on it, and it said, keep calm and preach on. And maybe I'll put that up someday for Amazon merchants. But here's another way that if you design t-shirts, here's a simple way of making income and possibly passive income as well. Mentioned earlier about writing blog posts. Maybe you've been writing blogs already. Maybe you're just getting into it. Here's a way to do some teaching as a pastor, or even talking about different topics. Whatever you want to write about, you can write in a blog post, but you can take some of that and turn it into a book. Or maybe you've been writing a book and not sure how to go about it. Self-publishing is an easy way to go, and you can do that through Amazon as well, through their KDP program. So here's another way you can use Amazon to make money. You can write your book and self-publish it through their ebook. They actually do printing as well. I haven't gone into the printing part side of things. I wrote a short 20-page book that I put on Kindle. And so that is one way to do it, just doing an ebook, or again, having them print it for you. So that's another way of making money as well. Here's something new. I don't know much about it. I'll just mention it. You'd have to research it for yourself, but it's called drop shipping. It's where you have a business, you're kind of a middleman. You find the deals, then you post it up, you buy it and you sell for a higher price, but you don't have to have it in stock for you. You're just having it shipped from the supplier to the person who's purchased it through you. So that is another source of way to make income. Maybe you are gifted in teaching as a pastor and church planter. And did you know that you can actually write your own coursework and sell it online, doing your own video and all that production value, and then you can post it online and make money off of that too. This site here, foundr.com, is actually a site that teaches how to make an online course and how to sell it online. And so there's a tool that I just started looking at myself too, but it's a possibility as well. Again, research.fm, similar to the one Slice of Pie that I mentioned earlier. This does the same thing to surveys on music. We'll skip this one. This is just another testing one. I mentioned surveys too. Surveys can be a way to garner some side income as well too, but it doesn't pay out enough, again, for you to live on. Most of these are things that are just side things. If you do a few of them, some of these things can be very helpful down the road. The associate programs through different websites like Amazon can be more profitable if you have a high following, including things like YouTube. I mentioned before about YouTube. There's been this craze for several years now of people making money off of YouTube by posting videos. If you get to a certain point of so many watch hours and so many people watching, so many subscribers, I think it's about 1,000 subscribers, I think, then YouTube can put advertisements on your videos and you get paid for that. So that's passive income. In addition to the products you also mention or put the links in for each video post. So that's taking maybe another hobby you have is making videos for YouTube. Another way to make money is through doing YouTube videos. Google AdSense is another way for passive income too. Same thing with a blog again. You can put links to Google Ads, and Google Ads will just post the advertisements on your blog for you. It's just a matter of putting in a code that they have that you just copy and paste and put into your website, and then the rest is done by Google. They put up the ads. You can actually customize it somewhat as to what you're willing to allow or not allow that to be advertised, but that is a way for making passive income on your blog page. If you are doing YouTube videos or a podcast, you can probably, if you have great support too and a good community of people listening to you, here's another way that you can make money doing YouTube videos. And that's using through Patreon. Patreon is a site that you can, people can support you through it. And the membership through that, you can set up different tiers for what you're willing to do for special things for those who support you through Patreon. And it has been around for several years. I remember watching one YouTuber probably about a decade ago who was using this a decade ago as a means just to be able to afford to make the videos and pay for doing the videos. And so Patreon is a way to make money as well. If you have enough of a following, this is an area I would still suggest to research and watch videos and read articles on how to use Patreon, because a mistake I made when I started it, was I have had little to no community for the videos I was doing. And so I started doing Patreon, and I only got one person on Patreon. So you need to build up somewhat of a community first for doing YouTube videos. You need to have somewhat of a following. I don't know what that magic number is, and I don't think anyone says what that magic number is, but you need to have a good following first before you use Patreon. Once you do, you can use Patreon as a means to garner income too, for people to support you in doing videos, as even a side ministry too. I do use YouTube for my own personal purposes, including using this vlog, but also for my church as well too. So for my personal YouTube channel that you're viewing this from, I also post sermons. I also had some of my former episodes from podcasts posted there as well. And in the future, I plan to have some other teaching things, like teachings on evangelism and discipleship. So if you even post things of teaching on there, you can use Patreon as a way of saying, hey, I'm going to do this series, or what kind of series of teaching do you want me to teach on? You can get input from people through Patreon as well. So that is a tool that you can use to make money as well. One last thing is GoFundMe. It's one of those ones too where you can get people to support you for making funds. It's similar to Patreon. I don't know enough about it, but I know of other people who use it who find that is helpful for getting support for the different kind of work they do on the side. So that's basically all that I would suggest about side kind of jobs that you can do that are untraditional kind of jobs on the side. But again, these are things that you probably can't garner a full-time wage from, but they can help financially. So I encourage you to check out these links. They'll be all posted at the bottom too. One last note though is that there's another side thing that I've just started to look at recently too. You may have heard of the whole craze on cryptocurrencies, and there's actually a way to mine cryptocurrency. Yes, there's such a thing as mining cryptocurrencies, and there's programs out there. It's something that I think takes research. You need to make sure you know what you're doing first, because there's a few different avenues and ways to go about doing it. You can use your own laptop for mining cryptocurrencies. You can read about that, but the best ways, they say, is actually renting space or building your own mining kit, your own mining computer. But there's also the cost of power involved with that and the components to make a computer like that. So I would encourage researching that and checking that out, because as you may have heard that even cryptocurrencies are doing well in the market. And so that may be an avenue to connect with as well. And so do research on that, check that as an option for making income as well. I hope this has been helpful for you as a pastor or church planter. Maybe you're a layperson in your church, and maybe your pastor is in a position where he needs some way of garnering a little bit of income. I encourage you to pass this video on to them, because maybe something here might be of help to your pastor or church planter. Well, we're talking about evangelism in this video as well, and tonight we had just completed another outreach event that we had a video live feed called Hope in Troubled Times. And we've done a few. This is a third video outreach event. And we intended for it to be in person too, but no one came. But I did see online we had at least 6 people who had watched online. And so someone is watching. I know of 2 people who are watching who are Christians and from our church. There's one person who was on there who, I don't know who they are actually, that saw their name, but did not see, don't know who they are. So I don't know if they're Christians or not. But I'm guessing that they must have seen somewhere, whether it be a poster or a flyer I handed out. But yeah. So part of the beginning of our church involves evangelism. And it really is our desire that our church would grow primarily from evangelism. That really is only the true way a church grows. Now, it's possible that God may call someone from a church to leave the church in the same community to join your church because of how God wants to use them in your church. And that's all fine and good, because we want people to be obedient to God and what God wants a person to do. So that includes, where does God want the person placed in and be involved in part of the church. So we're good with those people coming too, or people who have just moved into the area who don't have a home church because they've just moved here, or what we call de-churched. These are people who are Christians who used to go to church but don't anymore for whatever reason, and just feel a call on God saying to them, come back to church, come back to be part of Christian community. And that's primarily where our growth has been so far, is de-churched people. But we do desire to see our biggest growth from evangelism, new Christians. And because the church really doesn't grow if it's not through evangelism. Now, yes, granted, there's part of growth, church growth is discipleship. That's part of the church growing deeper in relationship with each other and with God. But in order for the church to grow in number, it doesn't need new believers, because otherwise you're just sheep stealing or swapping sheep, and that's, for the most part, isn't profitable for any church. Most time when people leave a church, if it's not God calling them, or they're not, or if it's not because of a relocation of address, usually people leave churches because they're disgruntled about something, and that's not real church growth. That's just swapping sheep or stealing sheep, and stealing sheep does happen. I have seen pastors. It's happened to me where a pastor was visiting people in my church, and they decided they liked the other pastor and left our church to go to his church. So it does happen in churches sometimes, where there are some pastors who are, or people from churches that are trying to sheep steal, and shame on them. No, go and reach the lost with the gospel. If you, your church, or your pastor are trying to steal sheep from the churches, shame. Go get out there and go share the gospel, because there's a whole world of lost people who need to hear the gospel and need Jesus. So I would say that's why evangelism is so important for the church growth. And I'd say to any Christian, if you're not sharing the gospel, get off your butt and share the gospel with someone. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily leading a bunch of people to Christ. No, it's being obedient and sharing the gospel. Because I have what I believe to be called the rule of 8s. The average person to come to faith in Jesus Christ has heard the gospel 8 times and influenced by 8 Christians, on average. So we need every Christian out there sharing the gospel with the lost. Onaway is a town of just over 1,000 people. There are 3 evangelical churches, including our church plant. There's an Anglican, a Catholic, Seventh-day Adventist. And then outside of Onaway, a couple area like Alberta Beach near us has an Alliance Church. There's a Baptist church just beyond Alberta Beach. There's a community church halfway between here and Barrhead. So this area actually has a lot of churches, but how many are actually doing kingdom work? And I don't mean this to be a knock on the other churches. I don't know what the other churches are doing for evangelism. When I talk to the other pastors in the area, it doesn't sound like they're doing anything for evangelism in their churches. So again, this is not to be a slight on them. If they're doing something and I'm not hearing about it, it's very well possible that they're sharing the gospel. But I find this is the case in most churches, that most churches are not evangelizing across the board, not just my area. Check out the communities you're in. How many churches ask friends of yours in other churches, other pastors too, what are you doing? What is your church doing to reach the lost in your area? And I would dare to say that the vast majority of them are doing nothing. They might use nice things like saying, oh, well, we do a pancake breakfast, or we have a thing to give away clothes and food. Those are all great and nice things, but if they're not actually sharing the gospel, you're not doing evangelism. You're just doing a social program. So I know my thoughts on evangelism are very strong because most people don't share the gospel who say they're doing outreach and evangelism. They're not. I mean, yeah, they're maybe doing outreach, but they're not doing gospel work. And don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that we can't do acts of kindness of some kind to help people. In some cases, that's needed to soften a person's heart. Don't ever use it as an excuse, though, for, well, I have to earn the right to share the gospel. No, you don't. You've been commanded by Christ to do it, so do it. Again, don't mean to be too hard and harsh with this, but really, that's what the church is called to do, and that's how the church is going to grow. And I believe that to be the case, too, for our church. We are a small church still, and this whole COVID thing has made it very, very difficult to get out in the community. Because of the lockdowns we've had, it's been very difficult in order to go and meet people and share the gospel. We've had to find some creative ways, like doing on live streams. But as we are seeing more and more, less and less people are seeking God through these kind of means too. People aren't looking for a invite me to come event. People are looking for people to genuinely show their faith and hear the gospel. Now, I happen to notice in our area in the last few weeks while knocking on doors that there's more hardness towards God than I've ever seen. And early in COVID, I saw a complete opening of people wanting to talk about God. And I don't know what it is with this summer, but the summer has completely changed that for some reason. A lot less people willing to have gospel conversations about God and about faith. So maybe your area is different. I hope that's the case, but I'm just finding that the ground in our area is very, very hard ground spiritually. With that said, evangelism is the primary way that we want to see growth in the church, and is actually, as I mentioned last time, the first key was prayer. Second key is evangelism for the church. The church has to be evangelizing the lost. However your church does it, or however you do it, is important. What works in your community may not work in mine. What works in my community might not work in yours. That's why prayer, again, is an important key too, because listen to God. God knows what the area needs in order to receive the gospel. So go in prayer together as a church and ask, Lord, what is you want us to do to reach our community for you? And then do what he tells you to do. God will reveal it to you in your church. You just need to spend the time in prayer, seeking God's direction. So the very early inception of our church began with prayer and evangelism. Before we actually started forming as a church, before we actually even said, yes, God's called us to plant together, we started doing outreach stuff already. We had joined the On-Away Beautification Committee to help beautify On-Away, weeding out garden beds and and planting flowers. And we use that as a means to look for possibility of conversations with people. And even though we didn't have any gospel conversations then, it has since then opened up the door for conversations to share the gospel. So that was an early thing we did. That was back in May before we officially said, yes, God's calling us to plant together. Then in June, when we felt like God was saying, in the same week, we felt God calling us to start planting a church together. We have what's called Heritage Days in Onaway, the second, I can't remember if it's the first or second weekend of June every year, except for the last 2 years because of COVID. But so we talked to the committee and said, we would like to be in the community and give free water bottles. So we did that. We gave free water bottles. We had our shirts that actually has this logo here on it. We had t-shirts wearing those and handing out water bottles and tracts too. Ooh, handing out tracts. How dare you? I talked to this one church planter and told him that we were doing this, handing out water bottles and possibly handing out tracts to those who would be, because we would ask them, here's a free bottle of water. We just want to do this to show the love of Jesus in a practical way. By the way, would you like a tract too? We have a gospel tract. And we had a couple conversations, gospel conversations along that. And most times when we offered a tract, people would take it. There's some people who said, no, thank you. And we respected that and didn't hand them one then. But this one church planter I talked to, I told him that we're doing this. And he says, oh, I love handing out the water bottles idea. That's a great idea. But no, I don't like handing out the tracts. No, you shouldn't do that. No, you have to earn the rights to share the gospel. Baloney. You can't be a church planter and not share the gospel. And if you're not willing to hand out tracts or actually start a gospel conversation, at minimum, start a gospel conversation then somehow, then you're not planting a church. You're just going to try to steal sheep from other churches. And so that's not the model Christ has. Anyway, so that was the first thing we did for an outreach. And I tell you this, we are still seeing the effects of that since. The following summer, one member of our church and I were going door to door, knocking on doors, sharing the gospel. And one happened to be the door of our mayor. And this was kind of a cool story. We had knocked on their door. I can't remember if we handed out a tract or a flyer or we shared the gospel in some way to her and her family. And after we ended our conversation, we're walking away and they're actually going to their vehicle to drive off to go wherever they're going. And as we're walking away, she actually stops and says, hey, wait a second, I just want to say to you guys, thank you so much for handing out those water bottles. And that is one of the things we've done outreach-wise where we're sharing the gospel with it, handing out the water bottles, handing out water and living water. And it opened up the door to town council even more. I mean, I had a good open door with town council in short order after being forced out of our last church. And right away, town council was far more open to me than ever before when I was at that church. Interesting story behind that. But so there was always already an open door there with town council and the Heritage Committee, but it seemed to open up even more after handing out the water bottles. So much so that 2 years ago, we did a live nativity. God blessed us. There was a guy who has a petting zoo who, incidentally, they have him come for Heritage Days. And so we thought we want to support someone who supports our community too. He's not far away from here. He's about half an hour, 45-minute drive from Onaway. And anyway, his name is John's Funny Farm. So if you ever have the chance to go to John's Funny Farm, I do encourage you to check them out. I don't know if the guy's a Christian or not for sure. I know his family has a background in the Lions Church in Spruce Grove. But a wonderful fellow, and he was so kind and bent over backwards for us, even gave us a discount. And we're so thankful for that. And if we are able to do a live nativity again, we'd call him in a heartbeat if we have the money to. It's not that we don't want to pay the full rate. He deserves to be paid what he asked for. It definitely deserves it. Probably deserves more than what he's asking. But anyway, So we had him, and we did this live nativity 2 Christmases ago. Forward fast a year after, we brought up the live nativity, and we had found out from that live nativity that it was just too much work for such a small group that we are. It was a lot of work. We need more. We need at least not 10 more volunteers minimum to pull this off well, and we need more money in order to pull it off well too. So we decided, no, we don't believe God was calling us to do this. 2 weeks later, I'm having a conversation with one of the town councilmen at a thing called Make the Connection Nights in our community that our church was set up for to be involved in. And this one town council member says, hey, we're planning on doing the town light up this year, and would your church be willing to do the live nativity along with it? I don't know what kind of expression my face must have had, but I know I was in complete shock that she was asking on behalf of town council. And at the time, I said, oh, sorry, we just discussed this like just a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that we're not going to do because we're short. We don't have enough people to pull off properly. Part of it is having people to deal with the barricades and so that. And but I thought, I should go back to our church and talk about this. So I went back to our church, talked through it with them, and everyone was like going, yeah, if God's opening this door and town council's asking us to do it, let's do it. So we had thought through that. Well, okay, you know what? The barricades, manning the barricades, that's taken care of because town council has volunteers to do that. They were allowing us to do it as many times as we want through the evening, and which we had planned to do 3 times. Unfortunately, because of COVID and the lockdown that took place at the time of when it was planned to do the town light up with the live nativity, unfortunately, that whole event got canceled. But the point I'm making here is that God opened up doors, and because we were willing to share the gospel and find creative ways to do that too, trying to show the love of Jesus in a practical way by handing out water bottles while sharing the gospel. So I always like to say, again, it's fine to do social gospel things, doing kind of acts, as long as you're willing to share the gospel. So don't give the cup of cold water if you're not willing to share the living water. It just doesn't work otherwise, because all they will say that, these Christians are nice people. You know what? They're not going to darken the doors of your church still. They'll think you're nice people, but I always used to say that do kind acts so people kind of question why you're a good person, and it would lead to a gospel conversation. I haven't seen that happen once in my life. Maybe for someone else it may have happened, but it hasn't happened for me. So my thing is, as Jesus tells us, share the gospel. Be ready in season, out of season to preach the gospel. Yes, fine, do kind acts, but be ready to share the gospel. I'm not saying you need to force the conversation, but look for the open door, because God will provide the open door to share the gospel. So evangelism is the second key for the church. Very important, because the church is not going to grow. I don't care if your church is a mega church and is growing, but if it's not gospel work happening to see your church grow in numbers, then you're not really growing. All you're doing is getting sheep from other churches. So evangelism is key. That's part of our story as New Life Christian Community. We were just seeking different ways. One of them was, again, during COVID, doing these live streams of sharing the gospel. We did one called Peace with God. Was excellent. One person in our church named Keith put that together. And he put together the second series we did called Getting Right with God. It was basically Peace with God, just rebranded and tweaked a little bit to fit the title a bit more. And then tonight we did Hope in Troubled Times. Really fits with the times because these are troubling times. And so, like I said, it seems like people aren't really wanting to come and see things. It's more, you got to go on their turf. And that's exactly what Jesus did. He went on people's turf to share the good news of who he was. The apostles, disciples throughout the book of Acts, through the epistles, we see through the epistles too. Christians went where the lost were and shared the gospel. My neighbor next door, I'd go. I still do go to his place to visit him, and usually he has some drinks and has too many. But because I'm willing to go on his turf, and I'm not saying we need to partake. We don't need to get drunk with them, not at all, because God's word tells us we're not supposed to be drunk with wine. So don't get drunk. If you have a problem with a person who has a problem with alcohol, period, then don't drink. But go into where they are. Now, if you're a person who alcohol has been a problem in your past and you have freedom from it now, but you know that if you have a smell of it or even or a taste of it, that you're going down a bad road again, then don't go find another way to be a light to that person. But I've spent time with him and it's opened up doors to sharing the gospel with him. Same thing too. That neighbor has told other neighbors that I'm a Christian. And my neighbors on both sides of us can't believe that I'm actually a pastor because I'm willing to go on their turf, even when they're at their worst drunk. Again, we don't need to partake of what they're doing, but get on people's turf. So both of these neighbors have told other people that I'm a Christian and that I'm a pastor, and I guess they think that I'm pretty cool because I hang out with them. And other neighbors have been asking me about Christ. So yes, do the nice, kind acts but look for where the opportunities are to share the gospel, because God will give them to you. Every single time I've done that, where I've gone on people's turf, God has opened up doors to share the gospel. So we as a church individually and as the church as a whole need to do evangelism together. Need to be out there and even inviting our non-Christian friends to different church activities. I'm not saying they need to be invited to Sunday service. You can and should invite them to come to Sunday service. And your pastor should be sharing the gospel if he sees people he hasn't seen before. But, by the way, worship service isn't really about evangelism then. It's about bringing honor to God. However, when someone comes in that I know that I haven't seen before, I'm sharing the gospel because I don't know if they're a Christian or not. And if I know that, and if I don't know, or if I know for sure that they aren't a Christian, I make sure the gospel is preached so you've heard it at least once. But generally, I focus on the service being on focus on God because it's about God, worshiping God. But anyway, evangelism is a key to the church. It's key to church growth. I'm not talking about church growth models and church growth movement, but Jesus tells us it's the way his church is going to grow, by us sharing the gospel with those who are lost. So as a church, be in prayer and seeking God's direction for how you're to reach your community for Christ, how you as an individual to reach your friends and neighbors and family with the gospel, and how your church can work with you and you work with your church to work with others to be some of those 8 contacts of influence to those who are lost, so that those people can be influenced by 8 Christians, hear the gospel 8 times or more, and come to faith. So again, evangelism is so key to the church growth. I want to thank you for joining me on my vlog today and my sharing and rambling about evangelism and the church, and sharing a little bit about how our church started too. One of the keys being evangelism and prayer. And if you enjoy this content and or find it helpful, would you please subscribe and hit the notification bell? The more my channel grows, it helps to get higher up in the algorithm, so there's other Christians and other pastors who can come across my YouTube channel, and maybe these videos will be of help to them. And I encourage you too, if you find this helpful or enjoy it, please spread the word about this channel, because even though I'm vlogging my life in ministry somewhat and the life and process of our church plant, we still want this to be able to be a tool that helps other Christians and other churches too, and other church plants, because we're all in this together, as Red Green would say. But it's important for us as the church to grow together too. It's not just about one local church; it's about the whole body of Christ. And if I can be of assistance in some way to help you in your faith or your church, whatever issue it is of growth, discipleship, evangelism, prayer, I want to be of help to the kingdom of God. And so I hope my story and our church's story is of help to you. So again, if you find it helpful or you enjoy this content, please subscribe, click the notification bell, tell someone else about this channel as well too. Until next time, as I used to sign off on my podcast, I used to have preach the gospel to any person, anywhere, anytime, and at no matter the cost.